Talking today with John Kangas of Cedar Springs, Michigan, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Now, John, can you start us off with some background on yourself? To begin with, where and when were you born?
I was born in Cedar Springs, Michigan. Well, I mean, technically Grand Rapids, but raised in Cedar Springs my whole life.
And what year?
1981 is when I was born.
Okay. And then what did your family do for a living while you were growing up?
My mom stayed at home, still does, and my dad works for GM. So, and amazingly still does. So.
Okay, that's pretty good. All right. And then did you go through the public schools?
Yep, public schools my whole life.
Okay. And so when did you graduate from high school?
2000.
All right. And once you graduated, what did you do after that?
Well, I became a father quite recently, like probably about 3 months after graduation.
Okay.
So, and then I started working in factories, stuff like that. Eventually got laid off, as most people did in the time. And then, yeah, that's pretty much, that's my background there.
Now, were you unemployed then when 9/11 happened?
Yes, I was unemployed when 9/11 happened.
How did you hear about that or first see it?
Well, I had to move back in with my parents, and I was out of the house for like 6 months, moved out of the house for 6 months, and then came back. Yeah, and I woke up one morning and my mom's like, hey, somebody bombed, the World Trade Center. And I walked into the living room and I saw on the TV the second plane hit as soon as I walked in and saw the second plane hit.
All right. And then what's the process that got you from seeing that to deciding to enlist in the military, or what went into the decision to enlist?
To be perfectly honest, that had very little to do with it. Okay. That had very, very little to do with it. Yeah, I was unemployed. I started selling coupon books door to door. I remember walking around like for hours and hours, for 12 hours a day, going, the Army can't be much worse than this. So, so then I went to the recruiting station. Initially, I went to the Air Force. They turned me down because I had a child. I don't know if that was legal or whatever, but they were just like, they have higher standards, and they were just like, Army's over there.
Okay.
So as soon as I walked in, they're like, oh, you have a kid? Army's over there. So then I walked over to the Army. So.
All right. And then once you then sign up, now what process follows? You go to the recruitment office and then...
Okay, so I went to the recruiting office. They made me take a practice test. I passed that, and then they took me down to MEPS in Lansing like about a week later. That's where I signed up for what my job title was going to be, all that stuff. A very high-pressured situation. They keep you locked in. You can't leave. The only way you can leave is if you sign the paper, and then your recruiter can take you home. Okay. So it's almost like a timeshare kind of. That's how I equate it. It's a very high-pressured, high-sale situation that the only way out is to sign this paper.
Now, did they have particular kinds of training that they were trying to move you into, or they just wanted you to pick something? Or
No. They had most definitely had particular, like off of my test, there's jobs that I was qualified for, half of which they said were not available because they were already filled. They're like, here, these are your 4 choices. Please pick one of these, and I picked radar.
Okay. Was it just sort of radar generally, or more specialized?
Well, there's a lot of lying that goes on in the recruitment process. They told me that I could get a job in an air traffic controller position after the Army, which is the most ridiculous thing. In hindsight, that seems, I can't believe I fell for that. But
it's the sort of thing that would be something that would actually be familiar to somebody that you're talking to, too. And,
right.
And then maybe any other possible application.
Right. Well, and then the counselor at the time very crudely put, so what kind of job are you looking for? Are you looking to be, I don't know what kind of words I can use in this interview, but basically, do you want to be a pussy, or do you want a pussy job, or do you want a man job? And so he found this radar thing, and he's like, well, it's got this, this woman factor that you seem to like real a lot, but it's still considered combat arms, so you can hold your head up high. Okay, fair enough.
What sort of person was this recruiter? Was this how old?
This wasn't a recruiter. This wasn't my recruiter. This was a counselor at MEPS.
Okay.
So he was probably about 38 at the time, E7, sergeant first class.
Okay, so sort of career NCO.
Yeah, career NCO. Trying to pressure me into a job that he needed to fill. So.
Okay. So you agree to that. Now then you go back home and then wait for them to call you, or what happens?
I went on the delayed entry program, but it only gave me 2 weeks, just because I wanted to, I didn't know when I was going to see my girlfriend, who is now my wife, but at the time was my girlfriend and my child.
Mm-hmm.
So, I wanted to spend as much time as that, and that's what they were willing to give me. So,
Okay.
so I took 2 weeks. So.
All right. Now, where do they ship you for basic training?
I went to Fort Sill,
Okay.
Oklahoma. So,
Okay. Describe what's that place like these days?
these days, well, it's completely different. As soon as I got there, they put us down into bed and stuff, and it was like 2 o'clock in the morning, and I laid down on this bunk, and it says, if you can read this, you're F you, blah blah blah, and I just remember going, why did I do this? This is horrible. And then 2 hours later they woke us up and they started getting us stuff and getting us ready to go to basic training and stuff.
Okay. Now, were the facilities there relatively new, or do you think they dated to Vietnam or sometime before?
Sometime before. Sometime before. Well, not the basic training sites. They call it reception. Reception site, yeah, it was pretty old.
Because it's an old base. It was big even in World War II and before that.
Yeah,
so.
before that, yeah. So.
All right. Now, how do they treat you now as an enlistee when you show up in basic training? How much of the old-fashioned kind of drill sergeant stuff do you get, or what happens to you in those first weeks?
Okay, well, the first weeks, it just depends on your knowledge of the military and regulations, and so most of us, we just came in, and most people were like me, like had some sort of sob story, like, oh, I can't make it, blah, 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 I need to figure out something else to do with my life. And so none of us knew, what the rules were and stuff. No, they didn't treat us very well. I'm sure it wasn't as bad as, like, people that got trained in Vietnam, but at the time, we didn't know. Like, we had to wake up 3 o'clock in the morning, every morning, and clean the barracks. But we had to keep the lights off. And I never understood that until I got out and understood the regulations, and that was all. We couldn't turn the lights on because the drill sergeants didn't want to get caught. So, yep.
So there's maybe a set of official rules about how they're supposed to treat you, and then there's what they think they want to do.
The unspoken rules about how they treat us, correct. And a lot of that stuff has been changed, but we'll get to that later.
All right. Now, how much emphasis was there on physical training?
Well, yeah, a lot of, yeah. So, I mean, every morning, it was just like active duty, except, it was more, instead of running 4 miles a day, you're running 6, 7, 8, but they tell you only ran 3 miles. Somehow, like, in your mind, if they told you that, then it wouldn't seem that bad, but no, it was like 6, 7, 8, 9 miles a day.
Okay. Now, what kind of shape were you in when you went in?
Oh, no, not very good shape. Not very good shape at all. I mean, I sat on my couch the most of my life, so I had, never done push-ups or anything like that, just from, like, PE in high school.
Okay. Now, over the course of basic training, then, did they get you into shape?
Oh yeah. And by the time I was out, yes, I was in very good shape.
Okay. How long did basic last?
That was 6 weeks.
Okay. So you kind of the crash course pretty quickly. Were there many people who decided to quit or wash out, or do you pretty much all?
But that's the thing. There is no washing out. There were some people that got thrown out, but that was due to their own, like, somebody pulled ammunition off the range and threatened a drill sergeant. Gone. Mm-hmm. And those people gone in a second. Now, there's people that were sitting there that were trying to figure out how to get out the entire time. And there's no getting out. And the longer that you try to delay that process, you're just going to be stuck in the basic training, in that training cycle, which people treat you like dirt. So there's no reason to, there's more of a reason to try to do it and to get it over with, because that always seemed much faster. I watched so many people try to figure out a way out of it after the fact, and you're already here.
Yeah. And part of the point of it is to get you just to get used to doing it the Army way.
Yeah.
And once you make that adjustment. Now, once you start to figure it out a little bit or make the adjustment and get in better shape, does the treatment of the recruits get better? The guys, if you're doing well, is there some sense that the drill sergeants have some respect for you, or do they stay the same level the whole time?
My unit, they stayed the same level the whole time. There's supposed to be different phases that you go through, but they kept us at the same phase the entire time up until graduation. And then even after graduation, our family showed up and stuff, and yeah, they made us clean the barracks and repaint everything and stuff like that. Come to find out, we found out our drill sergeants, usually they get like a 2-week downtime in between cycles, but because of after 9/11, there's so many recruits coming through, so they weren't getting that. But they still had to get everything ready, but they still wanted their time, so they made us do it. So we literally had we literally had families show up after graduation, like the day after graduation, because right after graduation we could go out with our family and stuff like that. So our family showed up the next day, and the drill sergeant, go, get out of here. This is, you know, your kids are worthless, and it's your fault. Get out of here. And this isn't a joke. I will call the MPs, and they did call the MPs and kicked everybody off the drill pad.
Wow.
Also, none of that was legal at the time, and I'm not sure how they got away with it, but they got away with it.
All right. Now, once you complete basic, what do they do with you next?
Then I go into AIT, which is my my actual job title. So.
Did you stay at Fort Sill for that? Or?
Yeah, because that's still field artillery. So everything field artillery related stayed right there.
Right. Now, do they move you to a different barracks now?
Yeah, different barracks, different drill sergeants. So you go from here to, you know, because it was like during the basic training process, there's people for all different kinds of MOSs waiting there, and then, you know, after they did that, then if their job was somewhere else, then they would go to that base and train there. So.
Okay, so now you're going. Now, was there a certain chunk of the company you trained with in basic that you went with at the same time, or were you pretty much by yourself?
There was about 4 of us.
Okay.
From that chunk that went over there.
All right. Now, what are you doing now in AIT?
Just learning my job. You know, that's pretty much it. Learning my job, and then still physical training every morning because it's the Army. Every day you wake up, you go, you work out, and then.
Now, did the drill sergeants behave differently at that level?
Oh yeah, most definitely. And it was, I mean, that was one of the things that they. I mean, if you became an AIT drill sergeant, your life was completely different because you're not waking up every morning with these troops. You don't have to stay there all night. I mean, still you would have to stay there. Like one drill sergeant would have to rotate, stay there all night, but they really didn't do anything. And then we're gone half the day.
Yeah.
So half the day they're just sitting there, you know, doing whatever they do. I'm assuming playing video games or doing something.
All right. Now, what kinds of things were you actually learning? What were they teaching you to do?
Well, so basic training is basically just basic soldier skills, how to shoot, move, communicate, all that stuff. And then in AIT was just my job. So this is how, you know, they would show, like I worked on a radar, so this is how the setup worked. You know, this is how you set up, because it was mobile radar, so it was all on trucks. So that was like a big emphasis of the training, and that was 4 weeks. But no, that was longer than 4 weeks. That was like 9 weeks. It's hard to remember. But yeah, that was a big chunk of the training. It's just learning how to set up all, because that's what you're going to be doing when you're a private anyways. The real functionality of the computer system. We did learn that stuff, but not that the focus wasn't there, because when you're, you know, a private, you're going to go and you're going to set that thing up.
Right.
You're going to be the guy running cables in the middle of the woods, hooking it up. So that's pretty much what we spend the focus on.
All right. Now, were you now on the kind of schedule where it's more like a day job and you get some time off, or were they still doing you things at all hours?
Oh, no. There was not things all hours, but I mean, there's still certain things that were going on. That there's a thing called fire guard. So like, and this is only what they do in basic and AIT now. It's so when everybody else is sleeping, it's somebody's job to stay up. So every hour, somebody's switching off. So your sleep is always constantly getting interrupted. So. But no, not like a regular job. It was a lot more relaxed, and it was getting more towards like having a real job. But I mean, still, you're waking up at 5:30 in the morning, working out, and take a shower, eat breakfast, and then off to school.
All right. Now, once you complete AIT, do they put you on a base in the U.S. for a while, or are they shipping you overseas?
I got shipped overseas, and I got shipped over to Germany.
Okay.
So that was I knew right away you know. It was probably about the last 2 weeks. I was finding out that I was going over to Germany.
Okay. And then when did they actually send you to Germany? Approximate date? Or?
The October.
Okay. Of 2002?
Of 2002.
All right. Now, where in Germany did you go?
Bamberg.
Okay.
So.
And then what did they do with you once you were there?
Okay. Well, once I got there, it was just, you know, I just joined the fold and just started working just like everybody else.
Now, were you assigned to a unit at this point?
Yeah, I was assigned to a unit.
Okay, and so what unit? What was it? This?
Yeah, 133. 1st and the 33rd Field Artillery.
Okay, so 1st Battalion,
1st Infantry Division,
yes.
33rd Field Artillery.
Right.
And, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because the Library of Congress is fussy about this. We always want to make sure that we know what all those codes are. So,
Right. Right.
all right. Basically, you're assigned with the unit so that when they do eventually deploy you to Iraq, you're going with the unit rather than going individually as a replacement.
Right.
Right.
And then, well, when I showed up, half of my unit was gone because that's when we were still doing the Kosovo rotations. And we were being told 6 months when when half of the unit came back, the other half was going to fill in. That didn't really go out. I never went.
Okay.
They only picked like 6 people to go back to replace the 150 that left.
All right. So basically, the 1st Division, I mean, they're based in Germany, traditionally part of NATO and all of that kind of thing, and had been for a long time. So parts of that unit were rotating through Kosovo as peacekeepers prior to 9/11, back from all of that. So some of that stuff was still going on. People
Right, and that's what we were training for, too.
Right.
We were training for Kosovo. And people have been, and that's the mission that we've been training on for years. So.
All right. And now, in terms of using radar and so forth, what would you have been doing for that?
Because people were lobbing mortars at towns and cities and stuff like that, civilian populations. So they would backtrack to find out where that was coming from, and then they would send somebody to go deal with it or fire back on it or something like that.
So you specifically are using radar to try to locate enemy mortar positions as opposed to looking for aircraft or something else like that?
Right.
Okay. All right. Now, how long then did you spend in Germany?
It was a year.
Okay.
Full year.
Okay, so what was life like there, kind of day-to-day basis?
I mean, it was the Army. You wake up and you work out, and then every day we had to do radar runtime. So every day we had to keep running that radar because if you don't run it, it breaks down. So it was like 20 hours a week. So if you got lucky, you got to be that guy to just sit in there and do nothing. But other than that, then they would just invent things. If there wasn't anything going on, somebody would invent something for you to do. We had a first sergeant that really had a thing about the tents. So we had these tents, and he'd tell us to put them up, and then somebody would come and tell us to take them down, and then he'd get mad because he wasn't the one that told us to put them back down. So this would go on.
All right. Now, do you get time off? Can you go off base or do anything while you're there?
Yeah. So you get weekends off just like anybody else, and then you get any government holidays. So you get all that stuff. So any national holidays, and sometimes you get lucky because you get German holidays, and sometimes the 1st Infantry, like the general of 1st Infantry, would decide, okay, this German holiday we'll get off. So a lot of 4-day weekends.
Okay. So what would you do with the time off?
I'd drink.
Okay.
And I'm not going to lie about that. I drank a lot. Pretty much everybody did. So.
But you weren't doing a whole lot of tourism or that kind of thing?
No. Well, I mean, second of all, I had my wife and my kid back at home, and I'd been trying to fight for them to get over there.
Right.
That wasn't on anybody's priority list. And I understand that. I mean, the mission came first and whatnot. But, I mean, what else was I going to do?
Yeah.
Everybody else is going off trying to get girls and stuff, and then I'm living with these people, So yeah, just go out and drink. That was pretty much my only release for that year. So.
All right. Now, I don't know, what sort of facilities does the Army provide for sort of entertainment or otherwise? I mean, did they do anything else for you? Or?
Well, there's an MWR, but it's pretty shabby. It was pretty shabby. Like big screen TV, that's about it. Big screen TV and maybe a video game. But pretty much you're on your own for your own entertainment.
All right. In terms of the job itself, I mean, if you were looking at Army recruiting commercials and so forth from that period, you see lots of really fancy high-tech equipment and so forth. What kind of actual equipment were you using when you're doing your radar?
When I first got to Germany, everything we were using was from Vietnam, or just afterwards. A lot of stuff from the 80s and stuff. Like the computer system we had, it was in the back of a Humvee. So you had like a shelter. It kind of looks like an RV or something like that. And the back wall, like if you go inside the back wall, was all computers. And I mean cards that would be this thick that you'd have to pull out and then put back in. The hard drive on it was a tape deck. So you'd have to wait. Like if you screwed up something, you'd have to rewind the tape, and that could kill 30 minutes to 2 hours to wait for that tape to rewind to get back to the part that you need to get to.
All right, so higher tech hadn't fully caught up with them yet.
No, and people had said that Germany was the last to get stuff. We got the newer radars, but those were new in like 1998, 96, somewhere around there. It was a Linux-based system, but I mean it was basically Windows 95. So I mean, that's how long that took to catch up with us. But then again, I never saw those new radars in Fort Sill either when I was training. So
Right.
those were I mean, we saw them once, but that was it. And we just did like a simulator. We never like set up the actual system because they didn't have it.
All right. Now, you said you were there, you've been training for Kosovo, expecting to go there. At what point then do you find out you're going to go to Iraq?
It was about 8 months since I got to Germany. And then the people that they sent to Kosovo came back. The 6 people that they sent came back, and then we had a change of command. And then we got a new captain, and he informed us in his speech, like, I'm your new commander, and by the way, get ready, we're going to Iraq this winter. So.
All right. Now, were you paying attention to what was going on in Iraq or Afghanistan at that point, or were you just minding your own business and doing?
No, I mean, I was definitely. I mean. When Iraq happened, they locked us down in our base in Germany because all the Germans were very upset about us going into Iraq. There was a lot of protesting and stuff like that, so we weren't allowed to. We could leave base, but you couldn't drink. You couldn't go anywhere that was their sole business was alcohol, which is about 80% of anything in Germany. Their main source of income is alcohol. So yeah, we were pretty much locked down during that. So yeah, I mean, we were watching CNN just as much as everybody else was, because we're watching, people going in and stuff like that. We watched the.
All right. So then, now, do they change your training at all at that point, or is it still assuming you're just going to do all the same stuff?
It was still kind of assuming we were going to be doing. They knew we were going to be doing something that we were training to do, but the application of what we were doing and what we were trained to do was completely 2 different things. We had been always trained that our radar was set up so we would fight somebody that had like the same abilities that we had. This radar was supposed to, move every 20 minutes just so people couldn't get a lock on you, stuff like that. It wasn't supposed to be running 24/7, not ever moving, just staying in one stationary spot. We go over to Iraq, that's what we were doing. We were just staying in one spot on bases, protecting the bases.
Because you don't have an enemy who has equipment that can detect radar or actually launch anything at it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there was times that they had launched stuff at us, but with no accuracy.
Right. They didn't have a tracking system that would necessitate your moving.
Right. Correct. But there was no moving. We were just sitting there. Yep. So, yeah, the 2 things that they trained us to do, and that was the thing that I always thought was kind of weird, is that they should have spent more time on actually using the radar instead of in placement and in moving, because that was what the focus was, because that's the fight we were supposed to fight, and that's not what we did. But I mean, we did have some training about it, because we were the second wave in. So, excuse me. We were the second wave in, so they taught us, so when stuff started happening, we started getting, training, rudimentary training about it, but no one knew how to deal with it at the time. So it's like IUDs. How do you deal with IUDs? Okay.
All right. So when do you actually go into Iraq then?
That was 2004.
Okay. And what time of year or what month?
I take that back. It was 2003.
Okay.
That was in the winter. We got there, I would say February. Yeah, it was February.
That's probably 04 then, because the invasion is spring of 03.
Okay.
The original invasion.
Okay. Yeah. Correct. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, it was 04.
All
so it was February. It was right after the New Year and stuff.
All right.
Because we were literally training in snow up to here, and then then you're out there.
Off to Iraq. Okay. Now, how did they get you down to Iraq?
Okay. So first we went to Kuwait, and we spent a month in Kuwait training, and then getting a lot of catch up, because a lot of stuff had been coming out about all the what they were doing and stuff like that. So we were getting more of an idea of what we were going to be doing and training more on that. But then, so then how they got us there is we took all of our equipment and all of our vehicles, and we convoyed into wherever we were going. And for, that's like a 4-day drive for some people, nonstop. And that's how it was for us. It was a 4-day nonstop drive through Iraq.
All right. What part of Iraq did you wind up being stationed in initially?
Initially, for the first month, we got put in Balad, and that was the Anaconda, the Air Force base there. We showed up there, and there was 3 other radars from a National Guard unit there. That showed up with us. So that's where we initially stayed. But that ride there was brutal.
Hey, can you describe that a little bit? What was that like to?
There's no sleep. I was driving, and I was driving my warrant officer, and then we picked up 2 hitchhikers. That's what we called them, because 2 people that didn't have a ride. So they just threw them in. We never met one guy we never even met before, and you know, we didn't have any up armor, nothing like that, sandbags. So literally, it's like my Humvee was like a sandbag fort. Come to find out, that wouldn't protect you from anything. That was more of like just a safety blanket. and that was when the thought came, like, if you look like you're mean and that your truck is impervious, even though it's not impervious, that's going to tell the enemy to not mess with you. I guess it kind of worked. I mean, we did get an IED strike. None of our vehicles were hit. They hit right before the first vehicle went past. So we got lucky on that one. But
now, would that have been a case where there's somebody setting off the device, do you think, and they just timed it badly, or was it going to go automatically? Or
that was definitely somebody was, that we call it a controlled debt. Somebody was, basically there was a wire going somewhere, and there was some guy on the other end of it. Yeah, that was most definitely that was the case.
All right. Now, you get up there, and how long did it take you to get up to Balad? Was that 4 days?
Yeah, it was about 4 days. Well, here's the thing: is they sent a whole division out pretty much at the same time. They staggered everybody a half an hour, every section of that convoy half an hour between each other. But then there was points where an IUD strike would happen, and it would close down the road, and so then everybody would get backlodged. I remember being on a road going through Baghdad, a highway, 4-lane highway. Every single lane was a different convoy, and convoys started intermingling and stuff, and people got ran off the road from our own people, just because they didn't want to lose where they were going, because the Jessica Lynch stuff just happened. So that was like the big fear. Oh, I'm going to lose the guy in front of me, and then I'm going to end up, you know, in a hospital somewhere having to get rescued.
All right. Well, I think Jessica Lynch, that was 03.
That was 03, but that happened, so that was still fresh.
Oh, they're remembering that. So
right, and that was the lesson that had been learned, and so that everybody kept on. That was the thing. Don't lose your convoy. Don't lose your convoy. Don't get mixed up in another convoy. And so then everybody gets jam locked. I mean, and everybody's mixed in together.
All right. Now you get out to Balad. You say, okay, you've got. So did they have too many radar units to be useful there? Or?
No. They didn't have enough.
Okay.
That's the problem. That was the problem. They didn't have enough because they wanted to cover. Okay, so that Air Force base, they wanted to have a 360 coverage of it, so they needed like 6 radars. We only had 4, and so like there was gaps in where the radar could look and stuff. But basically, we lost that spot because another National Guard unit came in, saw how we were living, and liked it because we were living in a little house that we had fixed up. We got there, and the guys were burning their poop and stuff like that. We got there, and our warrant officer made sure we got a porta-john so we could stop doing that, which was really nice. We built the shower inside of the building and stuff like that, and we fixed that place up. And some colonel came in and went, "Oh, this is nice."
Okay, and then did you move out of Balad and go somewhere else at
that
point?
Yeah, then we went to Palawada, which was like a little base, probably about 30 miles north of the Air Force base. And that place was horrible. That place was getting mortared every single day. They kept on putting radars in there. We replaced another radar unit from our own unit that they thought that they weren't good. They didn't know what they were doing. But there was nowhere you could look because it was literally in the middle of a town. So either I could point this radar at a building or a tree. So they told us to point at a tree. Well, the radar beams don't go through stuff. Yeah, it has to be on top of a hill, it has to have lots of, so you couldn't, we weren't doing anything. So we were getting mortared all the time, and we were sitting with a mortar team that their job was to fire back on that stuff, or to go out there and get them, and we couldn't get anything. So then they started getting angry at us. That's not my fault.
Now, were there other units at that base besides you?
Oh, yeah.
So who else was there? Other parts of the 1st Division? Or?
Yeah, other parts of the 1st Infantry Division. I can't remember what unit that the people we were living with was.
Right. Now, do you have any idea what those guys were doing? I mean, were they trying to go out and patrol or secure the area or go after bad guys?
We were just defending ourselves. Okay. That was the kind of the weird thing about that part of the war, is that we weren't sticking our neck out for anybody. We were there protecting ourselves. We put these places in there, and then we were just protecting ourselves. Somebody would shoot at us or do something, and then we would try to figure out where they came from, and then, send infantry to go handle it. And that's pretty much how the whole war went.
Okay. Now, how long did you stay there?
That was about 2 months, and then they moved us to Fob McKenzie, which was over towards. It was in between Balad and Fallujah, so right in between. So.
Okay, and then what kind of facility was that?
Where we were living was like an old hangar, like there was bird shit in there. We had to get all the birds out, stuff like that. The people that were living there, that we replaced a reserve unit, and they were just living there, and they just had cots out. That's how they were living, with the birds and stuff like that. So we came in, we cleaned that whole place up and set up partitions so we all had rooms and stuff. We made ourselves a really nice spot, but I kept on worrying, like, when's somebody else going to come in here and go, oh, this is pretty nice in here.
Now, was this an easier place to operate than the last one had been?
Oh, yeah, much easier, much easier. Well, we replaced, there's two different types of radars that we were using at the time. There was a bigger one and then the smaller one. I was on the smaller one. And the reason they put us there, because we were obviously no good at where we were at. We were doing no good. We were just sitting there. So they moved us over there, and what happened is they had a big radar there, and what happened was the big radar was large enough to start jamming the radars on the Anaconda. So they jammed a bunch of radars on the Anaconda. They got mortar attacked or rocket attacked or something like that, and then they realized, oh, look, these two are jamming each other out. We're not doing anything. So they put a smaller one there so that our search range would be smaller, would just be on the edge of the next person's other range.
So they were gradually figuring things out or making adjustments.
Right. And but see, at the same time, the enemy's making these same adjustments and stuff like this constantly. We pick it up as soon as they fired. They got about 20 seconds. We could throw something back at them, but then they started setting stuff up on timers and stuff like that. And then towards the end, it just became okay. It came from there. The Air Force would send a jet over and try to watch the areas, see if anybody came back, and then they'd watch them go where they would go back home, and then they'd send a raid in after that. And that's pretty much cat and mouse, cat and mouse the whole time.
All right. Now, talk a little bit about the areas where these bases were. I mean, do you have, when you were in the town, for instance, was there a civilian population?
Oh yeah, there was civilians all around us. It was literally like in the middle of a town. Like if you stood up on top of the place that we were living, on top of the building we were living, you could see kids in a soccer field playing soccer. You could see bad guys over there doing their thing. I mean, literally, it was all right there, and that place was getting attacked all the time. All the time.
Yeah, and did you have much interaction with the Iraqis themselves, or you just kind of stayed hunkered down where you are? And
during that deployment, I pretty much stayed hunkered down. We pretty much stayed just on the bases, but we were only on the bases that the mortars were coming in at.
Right.
Henceforth, the moving us the 3 times.
Now, with those 3 different places, I mean, were you able to do much effective work? I mean, in terms of actually doing what you're supposed to be doing and help fight
3,
back?
4, 5, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. Okay.
Mic check.
I think it's back.
All right. Now, was the third place, did they move you on from there to someplace else, or did you just stay there?
Stayed the rest of the deployment. We stayed in that one. Very, very.
Okay. So you got, at some point, you're getting a little bit ahead of the bad guys or whatever, and so were you getting fewer mortar attacks eventually because of it?
Yeah. Potawatomi, you couldn't see a difference. Anaconda, nothing made a difference. I mean, still to this day, that place gets mortared on a daily basis.
Yeah. And let's see, can I get the other pieces of this? So by the time, so your total time in Iraq that first time is about how long?
That's a year.
Okay. Now, was there a system in place that told you, okay, you're going to be in a year, rotate out, or did you never really know how long you might stay?
It was a little bit of both. We knew that it could go no longer than a year, but then as soon as we got there, our sister unit, 3rd ID, that was also in Germany, because we were in Bamberg, they were in Baumholder. They were already there. They were the initial people in. Those were the people, and our division didn't replace them. 1st Cav did. They all went back home on a plane to Germany, got off the plane, started drinking and kissing their wives and stuff, and get back on the plane, you're going back. And literally that happened. People got off that plane and got back on. So then that's when everybody's like, I don't know how long we're going to stay here. We also were told that it wasn't going to be that long. Like, there's a good chance we're not going to stay here for the entire year, for our entire year rotation. We should be out of Iraq here pretty soon. All we got to do is just do our job. And if the better you do your job, the better you're going to get out of here, which obviously is not true.
All right. Now, were you basically working with the same set of people the whole time? So it was your unit, the guys you went over with from Germany, you're all still together, or were they moving people in and out?
Well, see what happened is, no, we all went, all 1st Infantry Division went at the same time.
Yeah.
So it was pretty much everybody I worked with, except for my actual unit, my battalion. They split us up because we were a radar faction, and they split us up into all these other things. Like I was working with 1-7 Cav. So 1st Infantry Division, 7th Cavalry. Yeah.
Well, 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry.
Yeah.
So you and then now, are you working at sort of at a battery? Are you is your group called a battery, even though you don't have guns? But are you?
Yeah, we're set up just like the rest of field artillery. So there's a battery. Well, there's the battalion and the battery.
Right.
So my battery, we didn't stick together because we all got shot out.
So
we're and then in that is sections, platoons, and then sections. Then we only had 2 platoons. One was the support, the headquarters platoon, and then the radar guys.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So you've got a relatively small unit that you're actually operating with. About how many guys were you?
In my radar section, it was 6. So there's a warrant officer, senior NCO, which is either E5, E6, senior radar operator, which is E4, E5, and then 2 privates, and a radar mechanic.
Okay, so pretty small little group. Now, how would you characterize morale in that little unit over the course of the time you were there?
Ups and downs. Ups and downs. I mean, there was times that we had fun and that morale was good. I mean, but most definitely the thought, I mean, going up into that war, it's like we were talking about earlier, is that we were told, hey, this is probably going to end soon. You know, be prepared for that we might only be here 6 months, and then, you know, come to find out it's a year. You know, and you know, then to get out and find out, wow, I got lucky, because right after that, 15-month deployments started happening. You know, so.
All right. Now, did your section take any casualties in that time, or other part?
No, actually, we got really lucky. No casualties. We had a lot of close calls. We had people, not our section. There was another section that got mortar attacked really bad. No one had physical injuries, but then after the war, just getting rocked by it messed a couple of people up pretty bad. So, yeah.
Okay. And the places where you were, I mean, did you sort of see much in terms of either battle damage or casualties or anything else like that on the bases going on around you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, there was times that wounded from, you know, the insurgency and the U.S. military was always coming in and out. At Palawada, there was a prison. This is also right after all the scandals were coming out and stuff. That didn't seem to slow anything down, because every night blood screams that I don't want to remember. I hear all night, because special forces would come in, and then you'd hear that all fucking night long. So, yeah, but no, I mean, I'd see casualties, but nobody in my unit got hurt, you know, luckily.
Yeah. But you know you're in a war.
Oh, yeah, you most definitely know you're war. I mean, we were getting mortared all the time. It became such second nature. I mean, our warrant officer was really, really skittish about the whole mortar thing. I remember I had that black market satellite dish, and the only thing that would come in English was like Looney Tunes, like old Looney Tune Warner Brothers cartoons. And every time Wile E. Coyote would fall off the cliff, he'd come, "Oh, what's going on? We got to get to shelter." Like, it's a cartoon. And usually if you actually hear something like that, that means it's not going to hit you. Yeah. It's behind you. So, yeah. But mortaring became second nature. Like, every day, like, you know, and there's people getting killed when they would go to the store and stuff. But, you know, either you let fear control you, or you just accept it, because there's nothing else to do. Like, like, either I could just sit here and be scared that it's going to kill me eventually, which it could, but I can't control it. There's nothing I can do to mitigate that.
Right.
The mortar attacks.
Yeah, and were the mortar attacks themselves sort of fairly random in terms of where things hit, as opposed to being targeted on a particular thing?
It used to be random. One time they targeted us. We were out there working on the radar, and the mortar started coming in. And luckily, no one got hurt. We all got out of there right in the nick of time. But yeah, it happened. It's hard to explain. It happens every day, every single day.
But much of the time, it could land anywhere, so it doesn't matter what you do?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. And, and I remember laying in my bed and the warrant officer coming in like, oh, we're getting mortared. And I was still sleep, and I would sleep through it because I got so used to it. And he's like, oh, you need to get in the middle, or you could just stay where you're at. And like, I'll just stay where I'm at. Don't wake me up for this anymore.
Well,
Cause
did you have a bunker or anything like that?
Well, we were living in like a bunker like this, but there were spots that, like where the door was just a wooden door because it was just a hangar, but it was big and concrete and stuff. Okay. There was a maintenance unit that was like a mile away from us because we were like, this base was huge, but there was nothing there, so it was just like people just living out in the desert with like a wire around us. But there was a group that was right next to us that was living in the same situation, maintenance unit that was same situation as us. They had a mortar come in and it hit right in front of the doorway, and went like that, knocked out the door and killed 3 people. So, yeah, but as I said, you can only mitigate it to a certain point. Then we started putting up pesco baskets and stuff like that. T-barriers started being more commonplace.
Okay. Now, are there other particular memories or incidents that you've got of that first year in there that kind of stand out in your mind that you haven't brought into the story here yet?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the most particular incident. I mean, that was the closest brush to death. I mean, I saw it, and it was what they shot at us was a rocket, but it was I can't remember what it's called. It blew in air. So like as soon as it didn't even hit the ground, it came down like this and just went like that, and it looked like a firework, and it just shot stuff out. I mean, I could feel stuff going past my face, and I don't even know why no one got hurt.
All right. So you get to the end of your year now. Okay. So then, what do they do with you then? You finished your year. What happens next?
Okay. So then we start going back to we start getting shipped back out to the unit, or back to Germany. It was about a 3-day process.
How do they get you out of Iraq?
Okay. Well, first you have to. At the time, we got lucky because we took an actual military flight instead of like the civilian flight that had been chartered by the military. That took us straight back to Germany. So we didn't have to sit around in Kuwait for a couple of weeks. We got very, very lucky. We just went back to Anaconda and then flew out of Anaconda.
All right.
That was really nice. That doesn't happen anymore. Yeah, but I mean, they got to search all your bags and stuff, and yeah, it's a long process. It was about 3 days just to leave there. If we would have went back to Kuwait, it'd probably been like 3 weeks, a 3-week process to get out.
So they just park you someplace in Kuwait for a while and
yeah,
just take their time.
And just take their time. Well, yeah, exactly.
Okay. So you get back to Germany. Now, how much time did you have left on your enlistment at that point?
6 months.
Okay.
6 months, maybe 8 months, somewhere around there.
Okay. And then did you spend the rest of the time in Germany, or do you rotate back to the States?
No. You say that's my unit. That's where I'm stationed. I stay in Germany. So I stayed there.
All right. Now, by the time you got back, I don't know, what was the climate like in Germany as far as the war in Iraq was going? Or
the Germans hated us. They hated us. There was a couple things going on. Bush started downgrading, pulling everybody out of Germany too. And that was going on too, because our unit was dissolving too. And then every day we'd have welcome back ceremonies, but they would bring somebody from the German military or the local government in Bamberg, and they were just pleading with us, don't leave, don't leave, don't leave, which was kind of weird because nobody there had the ability to be like, hey, Mr. President, they really like us to stay here, because their economy was run on us. I mean, you have 8,000 soldiers stationed there that all have disposable incomes that run that economy. If we were gone, they would lose all their money and stuff. So there was that going on, but there was a very large anti-U.S. sentiment around the world during that time. So
all right,
it was definitely seen. So a lot of times I said it was Canadian, but it was hard to give it away because I had the military cut and stuff. You go somewhere and people would know exactly who you were. So
Okay. Now, did you learn some German while you were there?
Yeah, very, very little. Very, very little. Because most of the time I spent was training.
Right.
Like, if you know, the weekends that I was there, you know, I'd go out drinking and stuff, but everybody around that base spoke English.
Yeah.
So, and almost all the Germans spoke English too, even a little bit. I mean, there was times that, you know, I'd have to, you know, say things to get, you know, drink or food or something like that. But other than that, no, not really.
Okay. So a lot of what communication there was just in English.
Yeah, right.
Okay. All right. Now, as you got toward the end of your enlistment, did they make an effort to get you to re-up?
Oh, yeah. Oh, most definitely. And then they kept on throwing in my face that you're going to get recalled. Oh, you're going to get recalled. You're going to spend a month home and then get recalled. Well, that's a month's leave. I'll take it, you know. But yeah, it was very high pressure the whole time. You know, a lot of you're going to fail, which I thought was kind of weird. Like, oh, you know, if you're going to go home, you're just going to fail. And like this idea that I didn't understand what bills were. Like, you know, you're going to have to, like, pay rent and stuff like that and blah, blah, blah. Like, okay, I understand that. I'm willing to take that risk, you know, like.
Yeah, well, they geared toward the sort of the 20-year-old kid who'd gone straight from home or high school to into the Army kind of thing.
Right, right. And there were some people that, you know, in hindsight I've seen that maybe should have stayed in because they were completely unprepared for the real world. I mean, luckily I had been out for, you know, graduated high school, been, you know, lived a life for about 2 years before I joined. So, you know, I had an understanding of what was going to happen. I knew that I was going to have to pay rent.
Now, what do they offer you by way of incentive to stay in?
Choice of duty station, Hawaii. That was the big one. Hawaii, some sort of enlistment bonus, and then a guarantee that I would make the next rank. I thought that was kind of wrong, that you shouldn't use that as an enlistment bonus. Or a re-enlistment bonus is the next rank, because then you're putting people that aren't prepared for the situation. Like the guy who couldn't make the next rank for the last 4 years, somehow now he's good enough to make that the transition to that. That didn't make any sense.
Now, what rank were you at that time?
I was a specialist E4.
Okay, so basically a corporal kind of level. Or
yeah, basically a corporal. It's a corporal without the, you know.
Missing an extra one of the pieces of stripe or something.
Yeah, right.
But above a PFC level.
Right, right, yeah.
Okay. All right. So you go out, and now when you do go out, they say, well, you're going to get recalled. I mean, how does that system work?
Okay. Well, as soon as you get out, when you sign up for an 8-year commitment. So I initially did 4, and so I had 4 years active duty, 4 years inactive duty, and then you get placed in what's called the inactive ready reserves, the IRR. So within that, at any point, in your time frame, they can call you back. You get a letter in the mail, and then you have to go report, and you know, and then they throw you wherever they need you.
All right. Well, the end of the first enlistment. Okay, you go back home. Now, when was that you got back to the States?
That was it was like October 05.
Okay. And then what did you do then once you got back home?
Sat on unemployment for 6 months. And got to spend time with my wife and my daughter. Got to do a lot of things that I always wanted to do when travel around the country and stuff like that. I had money left over from Iraq and stuff, so you know, I was prepared. Then after that, you know, worked at Costco for a little bit. That didn't really work out. And then I started working for a dial-up internet company. And then I did that for a while, and then I moved on to Comcast. So, yeah, so doing tech support. That's
all right. And then somewhere along the line, though, you get recalled.
Yeah. So it's about a year. I've been working at Comcast for a year. And then I get a letter in the mail. I get a FedEx package. It has just a brown envelope, just says my name on it. Usually when the Army sends me stuff, it has my rank or has some indication that this is what it is, you know, it is what it is. You know, the FedEx guy signs it. He creeps back off my porch real. And I go inside. I just assume my wife bought something on Amazon or something. Open the package, this huge package, and on top is the orders. And I just went, yeah.
So what else do they send you in a package?
Just information.
Okay.
You know, your rights. Information about, you know, how to, you know, if you need to storage your car, these are the places in your local area that we do business with, stuff like that.
Okay, so they're trying to ease the transition a little bit, or something.
Yeah.
All right. So then, what did you have to do? You got the orders. Now, what do you do?
I had to call this number, set up plane tickets, got that set up, and then they sent me to Fort Benning, Georgia after that for 2 weeks. That's all I knew, is that I was going to Fort Benning, Georgia. Did not know if I was going to Iraq. Did not know if I was going to Afghanistan. Did not know what was going on.
All right. Now, what happens at Fort Benning?
Fort Benning show up. There's drill sergeants there. Instantly scared everybody, but they didn't care. They understood, like, hey, you guys are back, you know. So you spent the first week in civilian clothes. I still had my beard, still, you know, it was weird, and just drinking pretty much. And I'm not gonna lie, it was drinking. I got the most, just drinking nonstop the entire time. And it's just in processing, going through medical and stuff like that, just making sure everybody's good to go. Then they just pushed everybody through medical, which was weird. Is there was people there that had been injured, seriously injured, prior to getting out, and they were trying to get, and the medical process was trying to push them through. I mean, a guy had metal all in his bodies, and he's telling these people, look, I've got metal, I can't do this anymore, blah, blah, blah. And they just kept on stamping it, approved, just pushing them, you know, pushing people through. On the other side is there's a lot of retirees. There's people that took the Clinton buyout, the annuity, and they're all coming back because they're all still stuck in that same category I'm in, but at least I'm done at this date. They're indefinite until the payouts, they stop taking the payout.
Right.
So there's people, all walks of life. I mean, there's Vietnam veterans there. I don't even know how that works out, but there was definitely Vietnam veterans. Any officer is in for life, unless they resign their commission. So those people are showing up, and all the old people are trying to get back in, as all the young people are trying to figure out how to get out. It was really weird. Well, especially the people that had retired. If you retired and you got recalled, you got more points on your retirement. So that was an extra, like, some people were looking at an extra 20 grand a year after after their tour was over. So they're trying to figure out how to get back in. You know, a guy with a cane throwing it and walking through, trying to get through. It was ridiculous.
All right. At what point then do you find out what's happening to you?
No, not okay. So you spend there, and that's supposed to be like a 2-week refresher in basic training, and it wasn't. And then they sent us over to your AIT, so you could relearn your job. 2 weeks in that.
Okay.
More drinking. Still don't know anything what's going on. Have no orders saying where I'm going. I just have orders that recalling me to support, you know, Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom. That's all I got. So I still don't know where I'm going. So it was like the last week at Fort Sill. Then we knew we were going. Okay. You know, some people were going here, here, and here, and so then you knew either, you know. Like, I was going to Fort Sill, so I knew I was going to help support Operation Iraqi Freedom, but didn't know in what capacity that was. Assuming that I was going to be doing my job, seeing that the Army spent all this money to fly me from my house to Fort Benning, back to Fort Sill. So I'm assuming that I'm going to do that. But then everybody else, you know, there's people going to Afghanistan from there, and we all got kind of, you know, weeded down from there.
Okay. So they send you from Fort Benning to Fort Sill, and then what do you do there?
That's just drinking. That's it. Oh, you mean from Fort Sill to Fort Hood?
Oh, you go to Fort.
Yeah, because I went to Fort Benning for my basic training refresher.
Fort Sill for the AIT?
For the AIT refresher.
Right.
Then at the last 2 days there, we get our orders. Then we get sent to Fort Hood. We get to Fort Hood, no one knows who we are. No one knows who we are. We're calling people, they don't know who we are. We sat in the airport for 4 hours. There was 2 flights that went out. The first people that got there 9 hours before we did. They were still sitting at the airport when we got there. You know, so then there's some unit that deals with medical holdovers, people that medically can't go from National Guard units that are rotating in and out. So they pick us up, and they have no idea what to do with us. And all they want to do is get rid of us because they're not doing anything, and they don't want a spotlight on them. So all they want to do is get rid of us. It was ridiculous. But then eventually, and then we find out that the unit that we were supposed to get attached to wasn't going to be there for 2 more weeks. So they were like, hey, well, can we leave? Well, no. So we just sat there for 2 weeks doing nothing. I did nothing, literally nothing for 2 weeks but watch movies. That's all. That was it.
Now, what unit were they attaching you to?
It was the Wyoming National Guard. I think it was, I just remembered it, like the unit was called the 1st and the 15th Fires Brigade.
Okay.
So, so they can have that. But yeah, so then we find out that then a representative from the unit that got there early, a major showed up, and he talked to us, and he's like, look, I understand where you guys are all coming from. I'm going to do an interview process to put you in the job that we think that you know best suits you. So we go through this interview process, still not knowing what the mission is. So we go through this interview process and blah, blah, blah. And then come to find out, it's just for us to drive trucks. We're doing convoy security in and out of Kuwait, back and forth from Kuwait, Iraq, and that's what the mission is. But I don't know. That whole interview process didn't make any sense because they slotted us by alphabetically. And it was obvious that they slotted us alphabetically. Okay, people that are going to first platoon is, Adams, blah, and down the line. And it was all done alphabetically. It had nothing to do with anything that we had done in the military. And nor did they care what we had done in the military. Because all these people, they were also, they were a MLRS battalion that, but they've been doing this, their last mission was training soldiers. But they didn't know how to train soldiers. They had been shooting rockets. But they didn't even know how to do that because they had been actually training to do national security stuff. Guarding nuclear bases, stuff like that. That's what that's what they had actually been training to do because that's what the National Guard used to do before this whole Iraq thing happened. So then we're in Fort Sill, and then we have to go through, and that was 4 months of going through a crash course of how to be in the Army.
That's Fort Hood, right?
This is at Fort Hood, yeah. So that's 4 months of the deployment right there, just sitting in Fort Hood.
But you'd already been in the Army.
I had already been in the Army.
So this was for the benefit of the National Guardsmen who were being called up for the first time?
Yeah.
Okay. And you're filling out the ranks of that unit, essentially?
Correct.
Okay.
But we have to go through the training, too.
Right.
Because in their eyes, we're just the same as them.
Yeah. What sort of relationship or dynamic was there between these Guardsmen and the rest of you?
Oh, very, very horrible. Well, then we found out that they sent their people home. They had people that they sent home because they got too many of us. And so they're like, oh, well, we already got them, so we'll just send these people we can send home. All right. Because they couldn't send us home, apparently. So, yeah, you got a bunch of, active duty war vets that are really, really upset. So, yeah, it wasn't good at all. It was anger and hatred, and I can't believe we made it through that mission just because we hated each other every day. And for some reason, they thought we were stupid and we didn't know what the Army was like. They never took any of our conversation. Anybody that had rank did not get put in a leadership position, specifically not put in a leadership position. It was ridiculous. It was really, really ridiculous.
Okay, and you got to go through this for 4 months.
Yeah, this is 4 months in Fort Hood, and then we go over to Iraq.
All right. Now this time, how do they get you there?
Man, same thing. Charter flight, That portion of it was exactly the same. Landing in Kuwait, exactly the same as I remembered it before. But yeah.
And then did they have to sit around in Kuwait for a while? Were they oriented?
Well, we stayed in Kuwait. Yeah. We were staying in Kuwait.
Okay.
So then, there's a thing called right seat, left seat drive. So when a unit gets there, you sit in the new unit sits in the passenger seat, and then they switch. But then the old unit still stays there with the new unit until they're like, okay, they're good, and then they leave.
So they're kind of orienting you to what the job is going to be, and the ones who have been doing it are showing you the ropes of it and that kind of thing. All right. So when did you actually get back to Iraq then?
Yeah, it was right after that. So that was the 4th of July.
Of what year?
Of 2009.
Okay. Now, by that, how was the situation now different in Iraq than what it had been earlier?
Oh yeah, night and day. All the stuff, all the northern stuff next to Kuwait wasn't getting attacked anymore. There's no IED strikes. There was one IED strike the whole time we were there, but yeah, that was it. It was nothing. It was just night and day. Plus, the government had changed. We just signed. It wasn't a status forces agreement, but there was certain things that we used to do that the Iraqi people didn't like, and obviously I get it. Don't shoot people. That's a no-brainer. But yeah, night and day. Never fired my weapon once that time. Never even loaded it.
Okay. And were you just going between Kuwait and Baghdad, or were you going all over the country?
No, it was a 4-hour drive. That was it. It was like 4 8-hour drive, depending on what was going on. And just back and forth. From this one base from Kuwait to the most northern base in Iraq. And just back and forth. That was it. That was the mission. That was a year of that. Well, that wasn't a year, but it was like 7 8 months.
All right. Now, so what's the daily routine then for that?
Yeah. Well, we would drive out at night, so your sleep schedule is completely off. There was no schedule. There was no and that was the thing that, and I get National Guard, and I tip my hat to them, because that is, I can't imagine living that life, going back and forth from the military, back and forth, back and forth. But they didn't understand the regiment, and like, we need this routine and stuff like that. There was no routine. You worked out when you felt like working out, stuff like that. No one forced you to do anything, which is kind of nice. I mean, I didn't really want to play those military games again. But yeah, so we would go out, you know, we'd leave at like 7 o'clock at night, get to the base at like around midnight in Iraq. You sleep there, and then you don't drive out until midnight the next night. Mm-hmm. So then you don't get back till 5, 6, 7 o'clock in the morning the next day, but then the unit's got stuff for you to do once you get there. And it was ridiculous, because they're all still on a daytime schedule. They're working 9 to 5, while all their troops are going back and forth from Iraq. They're not working that time frame, and they were always not willing to do stuff on our time frame, because they're always interrupting our sleep to go do briefs and stuff like that, sexual harassment stuff, because their unit was trying to knock out all the stuff that they would have to do in training when they got back, so they wouldn't have to do it, because then they had already done it. So then when they go to drill, they don't have to do anything. It was ridiculous. Like, you don't do anything at drill anyways. Why wouldn't you do this at drill? That's what those 2 weeks a year are for.
All right. You'd mentioned sort of the sexual harassment issue. In the units that you were serving in on either of these tours, did you have many women in them, or?
Well, my unit, the first time, there was no women in it. When I got recalled, the National Guard unit, yeah, there was a lot of women, and that's a completely different mentality. Yeah, men talk kind of crude and stuff in the Army, and it's you gotta watch what you say and stuff like that, and you know, yeah, it's completely different. It was completely different.
All right. How effective was the second unit? I mean, were you able to get the job done and operate effectively?
Yeah, it was effective. It was effective to the point, and I hate to badmouth people, but it was effective to the point. But my worry was, if something happened, I couldn't trust the guy next to me, which was a very weird thing to have, because the unit that I was in before, we were all very, very tight, and and those people I still talk to on a daily basis. And it's really odd that how I was in one unit that was all brothers, and this other unit that we were all combative towards each other the entire year. Like, there was this intense hatred. And most of us ever wanted, the guys that got recalled from the National Guard unit, was just a thank you. Like, we appreciate what you're doing. We understand that you didn't have to show up, that you could have just blew this off and not showed up, you know. But because of what the Army taught you, you showed up. But yeah, they didn't ever say thank you, and they hated us. Plus, we all like, when you get recalled, you can get rank a lot easier than you can normally get. And so then there was a lot of people getting mad about that. A lot of not the chain of command, but you know, people of the same rank, getting really upset. But they didn't understand. Like, the National Guard works on a slot system. We're all based from active duty, and when you're in the inactive ready reserves, it's still kind of based on that, except the points are lowered. So all you need is the points, and then you can get promoted. Yeah, and these people just hated us for it. And that just more anger, more anger.
What proportion of your unit was these returning veterans as opposed to the Guard?
I more than a quarter. Okay.
And did you guys kind of hang together then?
Oh yeah, yeah. We hung together. Like, my platoon in that, more than half of our unit, more than half of the people that I actually went on missions with were all recalls. The only person that was like 3 guys that were from the native to that unit, and only 1 guy that was actually native to the unit. The other guys were just from Wyoming. They just got roped into the deployment.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Aside from the question of what kind of language you use, were there other issues or problems involved in having women in a unit, or on the whole, were they integrated fairly well?
There was no problems in our unit. There was a lot of rape going on, and that still's going on to this day. That didn't happen in our unit. Luckily, it might have happened, but I didn't know about it. Not in my little circle. Right. That wasn't going on. We didn't have anybody doing stuff like that, or that stuff happening to people like that. But yeah, I mean, that's why we've kept on having these sexual harassment briefs. That was the other side of it, is that rape was very, very high in theater, and it was going on, and it was mostly towards the female soldiers. So yeah, so every time something like that would happen, we'd all get crowded in, get woke up from our sleep because we're sleeping in the daytime, and go talk about, you know.
All right. Now, was the expectation that you were going to be basically with this unit as long as it was deployed in Iraq, and then when they left, you left, or were you on a different clock?
We assumed we were on a different clock because we had started a month before they did. So we were under the assumption that we were going to be on a different clock than them. They were always under the assumption that you're leaving when we're leaving. And we finally did get out. We got out about a week, 2 weeks before they did. They left theater, but we found out as soon as we got back to Fort Hood that we were supposed to leave like a month ago. And like people like me, my contract was up in April, so then they were going to have to start paying me extra money, and they didn't want to do that. And they ended up doing it anyways because of that. But they were, but it was back and forth the whole time. It was completely combative between us and that National Guard unit, especially with us getting promoted. Like, they promoted people initially in Fort Hood, but they handpicked a couple of us, and then come to find out we were all up for it. You know, anybody that had passed the physical fitness test was up for the promotion. And all of us already had the points because we'd already been to Iraq.
Yeah.
So, yeah. It was completely combative. I mean, somebody had to call the Inspector General's office, and then after that happened, then blanket promotions for all the IR guys, except if you were really, really messed up, or that so.
Yeah. Among this group of people who were recalled that you're working with, I mean, did you see signs in some of them that the stress of it was really kind of getting to them, or issues? Yeah.
Oh yeah, and that even though that it was a much lower combat situation, the stress was 10 times higher. And there were some people that couldn't deal with it, and there were some people that were so mad that they got recalled, and they kept that anger the entire year. And I can't imagine that. I can't imagine that. Like, and I worked with these people, and they were angry and mad and upset the entire year. And
Now, when you went out the first time, did the Army do anything in terms of telling you what kind of services they had available, or counseling, or teach you anything about PTSD and that stuff?
Not really. Lightly touched on it, but that mentality was still there. That's a sign of weakness and stuff like that they talk about. But I mean, we had a guy in our unit. He got in trouble for drugs and stuff like that, but he had been screaming at people that I need help. As soon as he got back, I need help. He was addicted to sleeping pills. He was up all night. He started taking drugs and stuff like that. Never mind. And they busted him for that, but they never sent him to a psychologist. And then lo and behold, the year later, or was it like 3 years later, after another tour in Iraq, he died on a motorcycle going like 200 miles an hour on a crotch rocket.
Wow.
The signs were there, and no one did anything. All
right. So they're still having kind of a learning process as far as what to do with that.
But I will give you this, on this deployment, that had changed. And I think incidences like that, my friend had really, so much of that stuff had been going on. But here's the other thing that's crazy, because I got to see, because when we got called back, we got to see basic training again. And we got to see how basic training is run now. It's completely different. And I think sometimes things go either way too far this way or way too far this way. And they're trying, and I can see what they're doing. They're trying to mitigate the suicides. They're trying to mitigate it. But they're making basic training easier. But you kind of had to have that piece of it. Because then you get people that if you don't have the training, because they're simulating stress, and there's only a couple ways that you can simulate stress. I understand it. That needs to happen, but the focus is getting away from that, and the focus is more on trying to bring down the suicide rate. And then I think they're losing something in that, but that's my personal opinion.
So you've got a kinder, gentler version of basic training than what you went through.
Right.
In just in that amount of time. All right. Now, when you complete this second round, you get back to Fort Hood. Did they send you home pretty quickly after that because they didn't want to pay you?
Yeah. Well, and there's a lot of people upset and stuff like that, and things were getting messed up. I bought my own plane ticket back home. That's how it went out, because Yeah.
And then after that, were you still eligible to be recalled again? Was
No, no, my time's up because
Okay.
8 years, 2010. That was the.
all of that. All right. Now, did they? Now, do you get as you're going out? Do you get a kind of a debriefing process or anything else like that? I mean, you said you got something better in terms of treatment when you came out the second time.
Right, right. Well, there was more treatment and more talking about it and more focus on that while we were there. But then when we got back to Fort Hood, it was just a race to leave.
Okay.
I mean, it was a race to leave.
All right. So then when did you get back home the second time?
That would be, yeah, it was like late March, early April of 2010.
Okay. Now, since you got back, what have you been doing?
Well, I was working for about 4 months, and then I got laid off, and now I'm back on unemployment and trying to figure out what my next move is. So, and I'm probably going to go back to school this fall. That's what my plan is right now. So.
All right. Now, as a look back at this, your military experience here, how do you think that's affected you, and have you got positives out of it, or?
Oh, there's definitely positives out of it. There's negatives too, but there's positives. You know, the positive factors are that, you know, usually I'm on time for things. I apologize for today, but usually I'm very on time for things. The Army's instilled that in me, stuff like that. But the negatives is, you know, alcoholism, stuff like that. That's, you know, the Army makes you a functional alcoholic, and it does. And almost everybody I know drinks way more than they should. I drink way more than I should. I know that's in direct correlation with the military, and for some of the stuff that I've seen. But
was there a lot of other substance abuse beyond alcohol, or you had the guy with the sleeping pills and that kind of thing? But
oh yeah, my first unit, when we got back from Iraq, we were in Germany, and yeah, drug use was really, really high. There's two drugs that are easy. I would say in the United States, marijuana is the most accessible drug. In Germany, I would say methamphetamines and ecstasy is the most available drug and the easiest to find. And so there was a lot of that going on. So, I'm not going to lie about it. That's what happened.
Yeah, well, we tend to sometimes you'll stereotype veterans of one conflict or another with others, like you associate the Vietnam veterans with drug use or things like that. But you can have a lot of the same issues and the same problems. It doesn't matter so much maybe what war you're in.
No, I don't think so either. I think there's a direct correlation between those two things, with post-traumatic stress disorder and yeah, because it's the release. It's the release, and that's the other thing is that. Vietnam, they could drink and stuff like that. There's nothing out there for you. You know what I'm saying? There's no release. You're sitting there, and that's in my job. I mean, it sounds like not much happened and stuff like that. But that stress is so unique for sitting in that box for days and days on end, and sometimes by yourself, just sitting there waiting for something to happen. And so you're going from complete boredom to absolute fear and terror in a second, and it could happen at any moment. And that lives with me for the rest of my life. I mean, I hear large, noises and stuff. I jump and do all this stuff that, yeah. So.
All right. If you had it to do all over again, would you go again?
Yeah, I would do it again.
All right. All right then. I think that pretty well covers the story, and it's a good story and it's worth telling. So I'd just like to thank you for coming in and talking to me today.
Well, thank you, sir.
All right.